Welcome back to Eminence Daily, where the truth behind fame gets exposed. Eminem and 50 Cent have escalated tensions once again, delivering a sharp and calculated warning aimed directly at Suge Knight. Their message challenges everything previously assumed about their fractured relationship with Knight and reveals a lingering bitterness. This isn't just industry posturing. There's unresolved history fueling this latest move. To understand the gravity of the situation, it's important to revisit where it all began. The animosity didn't start recently. It was inherited, rooted in the moment Eminem and 50 aligned themselves with Director Suge Knight. Born Marion Hugh Knight Jr. had already carved out a powerful presence in the music world. He began working as a bodyguard for major artists like Bobby Brown, but soon realized that the real influence in the industry wasn't held by performers. It was controlled behind the scenes. By 1991, Knight joined forces with Dr. Dre, The Doc, and Dick Griffey, launching Death Row Records, a label that would reshape West Coast rap and dominate the streets. In 1992, Dr. Dre released The Chronic, a project that revolutionized hip-hop. Its sonic blueprint became iconic. Then in 1993, Snoop Dogg followed with Doggy Style, cementing Death Row as a commercial and cultural powerhouse. Together, these releases made it clear the label was a force nobody could ignore. By the time Tupac joined the label, Death Row had become unstoppable. It wasn't just a record label. It was the culture. With its signature sound, bold imagery, and massive commercial success, Death Row controlled the charts and the streets. But beneath that spotlight was a much darker truth. Suge Knight's influence extended far beyond music. His leadership style wasn't based on strategy alone. It thrived on fear and dominance. Rumors circulated that Vanilla Ice was coerced into signing over royalties after a rooftop confrontation. And that wasn't the only incident. Several insiders later revealed disturbing stories of Suge demanding artists strip in the office. Retaliation for what should have been minor disputes. Death Row's empire wasn't built solely on talent. It was cemented in intimidation. Suge Knight didn't manage the label. He enforced it. His word was law, and questioning him often came at a cost. By 1996, Dr. Dre reached his breaking point. Despite co-founding the label and owning a 50% stake, Dre walked away from it all, his royalties, his power, everything, just to escape the toxic environment. He left to build Aftermath Records from scratch, determined to succeed without the chaos. But Suge Knight viewed that departure as betrayal. He didn't just take it personally, he turned it into a vendetta. Dre's success outside of Death Row became a direct challenge, and Suge made it his business to try and block it at every turn. At first, it looked like Suge Knight might have been right. Aftermath's early releases struggled to meet expectations, and whispers started circulating that Dr. Dre had lost his edge. Meanwhile, Suge was watching from the sidelines, confident and quiet, as if Dre's downfall would happen on its own. But then came a game-changing move no one predicted. Dre signed a white rapper from Detroit with unmatched intensity. Eminem, a newcomer with relentless ambition, a gritty voice, and something undeniable to prove. When the Slim Shady LP hit the streets, everything changed. Eminem's style was unfiltered, cutting, and completely unlike anything mainstream had seen. His debut didn't just make waves, it took over. 3 Grammy wins later, Dre wasn't just back, he was leading again. That's when Suge Knight stopped watching silently. He shifted focus from Dre to Eminem. Several media outlets reported that Suge saw Eminem not just as a threat, but as a direct extension of the man who walked away from him. Fast forward to 1999, an award show moment that still sparks conversation. As Eminem made his way to the stage, Suge's crew appeared deep in numbers, wearing red, loud, and confrontational. They encircled the stage, shouting Death Row, clearly there to intimidate. But Eminem didn't react. He calmly walked forward, delivered the award to DMX, and returned to his seat without a single sign of fear. The message from Suge was loud, but the response was louder. Even outside the venue, Suge Knight's crew wasn't finished. They lingered near Eminem's limo, watching, waiting, like a message still needed delivering. But it made no difference. Eminem had faced far worse before. That kind of intimidation wasn't enough to rattle him or stop his momentum. Over the years, Suge continued to hover. Whenever Eminem's career surged, Suge responded, whether in interviews or through quiet industry moves. He constantly questioned Eminem's authenticity, dismissing his background and branding him a character built for entertainment, not struggle. But Suge Knight wasn't just talking. In 1999, during a Death Row reunion event in Hawaii, he decided to escalate. The guest list was stacked: Dre, Snoop, Eminem, and their families. It was billed as a relaxing escape, a chance for unity. But Suge had a different plan. Sources reported that his crew quietly entered the city, spreading out and preparing to cause disruption. Word reached Dre's team fast. They didn't wait. They responded with urgency. With families present, they took every precaution. Additional security was brought in. Law enforcement was notified and activated. As the private jet landed in Honolulu, officers were already stationed on the tarmac. No one was taking risks. The police stepped up immediately, pulling guests aside and saying, "You're coming with us." Avocation had quickly turned into a security operation. Around 20 officers stepped in saying, "You're coming with us." They weren't taking chances. The moment they mentioned Death Row's presence, the vibe shifted completely. Then came 2002, a turning point. Eminem heard Guess Who's Back, a mixtape from a rising rapper named 50 Cent. He immediately recognized the potential and handed it off to Dr. Director. Both were locked in. Soon after, 50 Cent officially signed with Shady and Aftermath. From that moment, the streets had a new voice. When Get Rich or Die Try dropped on February 6, 2003, the game changed instantly. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, moving over 872,000 units in the first week. A seismic shift in hip-hop had just occurred. But signing to Eminem and Dre's labels didn't just come with success. It meant stepping directly into their world, and that included inheriting old enemies. One of those long-standing tensions was with Suge Knight, who still had unresolved issues with both Dr. Dre and Eminem. According to multiple accounts, Suge wasn't pleased with how much power was shifting away from him. He reportedly showed up at one of 50 Cent's video shoots for Inda Club with around 30 men. It looked like intimidation in full force. The moment Suge's presence was noticed, much of the set cleared out quickly. Nobody wanted conflict, especially not on camera. This wasn't just about a video shoot. It was a reminder that the shadow of Death Row still lingered. Even as a new generation of artists began to rise. But here's where it takes a serious turn. 50 Cent didn't flinch. He didn't back up, didn't retreat. He stood firm. When Suge Knight tried to size him up, 50 reportedly faced him directly, asking what he wanted. That moment alone said everything. Suge, realizing his intimidation tactics weren't effective, turned around and left silently. It wasn't just a quiet retreat. It was a shift in energy. The fear factor that once surrounded Suge Knight didn't hold the same weight anymore. A new era had arrived and it wasn't bowing down. Then Eminem dropped a surprise, an unreleased diss track called Smack. Somehow it leaked online and immediately set the internet ablaze. Eminem didn't hold back, taking direct shots at both Suge Knight and Ja Rule with brutal precision. In the track, he delivered one of his most scathing lines, saying, "I'm holding Suge responsible for the deaths of the two greatest rappers to ever grace the face of this planet. If only the late, great Mr. Christopher Wallace could talk. He could tell you himself. I'm holding Suge responsible for the death of J. Rule or anyone else down with Death Row, in the immortal words of Pac speaking for me, and any other rapper next to get shot." That wasn't just a bar. It was a direct accusation tied to two of the most impactful losses in hip-hop history: Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I. The leak sparked renewed conversation. What was once considered buried history resurfaced with urgency. So far, Suge Knight has made no official response. But the message from Eminem and 50 Cent was loud, aggressive, and deeply calculated. The streets are listening. The silence from Suge says a lot. Now, while Suge Knight stayed quiet, the industry didn't. Behind the scenes, conversations about his legacy, intimidation tactics, and long-standing influence were bubbling back to the surface. Media outlets, podcasts, and forums reignited the question, how did one man manage to maintain control over so many artists through fear instead of loyalty? And more importantly, how did that control begin to unravel? After Eminem and 50 Cent pushed back, others started speaking out too. Former Death Row associates, security guards, and producers began dropping accounts of what it was really like behind those studio walls. Allegations of threats, disappearances, and financial exploitation started surfacing in ways that couldn't be ignored anymore. It wasn't just about Suge versus Dre, M, or 50. It became a bigger conversation about power, manipulation, and control in the music industry. The documentary wave only made it worse. New footage, interviews, and FBI files hinted at deeper layers of corruption linked to the Death Row empire. Eminem and 50 didn't just light a fire. They forced hip-hop to revisit a chap. Light a fire. They forced hip-hop to revisit a chap. Or many wanted to forget. And this time the narrative wasn't controlled by fear, it was controlled by truth. For Suge Knight, who once ruled with unchecked dominance, the silence isn't strength. It's the loudest alarm yet. What makes this whole situation even more powerful is how it circles back to legacy. Suge Knight built an empire on intimidation, but Eminem and 50 built theirs on resilience. And now, years later, the tables have turned. The industry isn't afraid anymore. Suge's name, once spoken in whispers, now carries a different weight. Eminem's unreleased track didn't just stir old drama. It served as a declaration. It reminded the culture that actions have consequences, even if they arrive decades later. The younger generation, the fans who only heard about death row in documentaries, now get to see the other side, the cost of silence and unchecked power. 50 Cent standing his ground, Eminem speaking his truth, and Dre walking away from millions to protect peace. Those decisions aged well. They didn't crumble under pressure. They shaped the next generation of artists who weren't afraid to take control of their stories. So now the question isn't just what Suge did, it's what the culture allowed and whether finally it's ready to stop protecting the myth and start confronting the man behind it. The reckoning didn't come in courtrooms. It came through music, documentaries, leaked verses, and voices that refused to be silenced. And this track might just be the beginning. One user commented, "I'm no expert on street politics, but I've often heard that the white guy in the crew has to prove himself twice as hard. That usually makes him the wildest." Another said, 50 did what anyone should do to a bully. Stand tall. Show no fear. Bullies survive on fear alone. That might explain why Eminem and 50 Cent connected so deeply. Mutual respect built on fearlessness. No retreat, no hesitation, just relentless forward motion. Someone else pointed out, Suge Knight never cared about the music. It was always about control. And look where that obsession with power got him. Now the conversation's shifting. Should Eminem have dropped this disc years ago when death row's shadow still loomed over the culture? Or is now, when silence is breaking and buried truths are surfacing, the perfect time for this to reemerge and force reflection? Either way, the impact is real, and the timing, intentional or not, speaks volumes. This wasn't just another diss track leak. It was a reminder of what the culture survived, who stepped up when it mattered, and how music can still shake the room even decades later. If you found this breakdown compelling, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are coming. Real history, real drama, and the truth behind the headlines.